Mark Meldrum, Meldrum's Monster Garage, and we're down here in Florida. And where are we, John?
The Villages.
The Villages. And this is John Perrette, my good buddy. And we came down to pick up a transmission for Mike's 66 Malibu convertible. We're delivering transmissions to him. We're taking another transmission back. But we got transmissions filled in my truck right now, so it's great. But what I really wanted to talk about today is these output shafts. And John's going to do another fabulous job of talking about output shafts on these manual transmissions from 1955 all the way up to 1982. So we're going to take you through the progression here. So I'm going to hand it over to John.
So we've been talking primarily about Muncie so far. And I decided we would enter some new material, and we're going to do 3-speed Saginaw's, and we're going to do Borg Warner T10s. We're going to review what I think I've already talked about with Muncie's, and then we're going to look at a Super T10. And these are the output shafts. And basically an output shaft, some of them are shorter than this, but there's splines on the back for the yoke from the dry shaft, and then the main shaft holds the gears, first, second, third, maybe even fourth. So this is what it looks like, and we're going to start with 1955. This is out of a 1955 Corvette, and it has a coarse spline in the back. It's coarse. This one is long because the Corvettes from 1955 through 1965 were longer transmissions. The Chevys had shorter transmissions, some of them, but it's the same basic design with regard to the output shaft, except that some are longer and some are shorter. So this is the front nose. This goes into the input shaft, and on the early 3-speeds, and these are what I cut my teeth on. I started rebuilding these when I was 14 years old.
Now, wait a minute. Did your mom teach you how to build transmissions?
Actually, it's a long story, but I was 14 years old. I had a 21-year-old friend who used to street race, and I used to get to go with him when he was cruising chicks. Not that I knew what I was doing. And so that's where I learned. And he used to shift his 57 Chevy, which had a 3-speed in it, and he would break this thing like every couple weeks because he had a big set of slicks on it, and I would help him repair them. And by the end of the summer, he was holding the flashlight for me because I just had a knack for fixing this. And I could do these little bearings. But at any rate, on all the later transmissions, there's only one row of bearings up here. Some of them even have cages that hold them together that make them easier to put in out. This one has 2 rows of bearings, and you literally have to take a piece of grease and stick it onto the needle bearing and then drop it down inside the container for this that holds them, and then put the main shaft in. So at any rate, very early main shaft. The Corvettes were a little bit unusual because the splines were a little bit longer. 57 Chevy, though, with an original 3-speed was just like this. And the only other comment that I want to make about these old 3-speed Saginaw Chevy transmissions, they were not synchronized in first. So if you slowed down at the light and got really slow, you couldn't go from second into first. You had to bring it to a stop to put it in first. Either that or lug it in second gear. Interesting, a lot of stories behind this old output shaft, but there it is.
Now, is that the picture you're going to show me of one of the early ones?
No, not.
Okay, we're going to get to a cool picture.
Yeah, but the thing that's interesting is this one has the same coarse splines as the picture we're going to talk about just in a few minutes. So the next two, these are early T10 transmissions, T10 output shafts. And they are essentially the same, except that the early ones had a bushed third gear that went here. And as a result of it, this area, the diameter is just a little bit larger than it is on this one. This is the later T10s, and it's cut out for third gears that do not have a bushing in them. And that's this area here is where the third gear goes. This is where the synchronizer goes. At any rate, the early one that had a bushed third gear in it, these went from 1957, the first year for a 4-speed for the United States, and a It went through 1958, 59. It went through for 3 years. They took the bushings out of third gears. This is the same output shaft, and it went from 1960 to 1963. No, I'm sorry, 1963. Same basic output though. They're very similar, but they're slightly different because of the third gear being bushed or not bushed. So I took a trade-in one year for a I think it was like a 1960 or so T10, and the guy told me that the splines in the back were straight. Now these splines almost always bend, just because back in the day I don't think the steel was as strong, and they had the less splines you have, the weaker that section is. All the Muncie have more splines, they almost twice as many, and then we'll talk about some even later output shafts that have more splines. But at any rate, he assured me that the splines on this transmission were good. I don't know, can you see this?
Oh yeah, that's showing up good.
This is what it looked like when I brought it out. This is absolutely the worst output shaft I've ever seen. Just kind of a funny story.
What'd that come out of?
I think it came out of a Corvette, and it would have been like in the 1960s or so. If you don't want your transmission to break or twist any shafts or twist your drive shaft into, make sure your tires spin. Because if your tires don't spin, something is going to get broken or bent. Something's got to break.
Yep.
So, okay, now we're going to run it. So what we covered so far was Saginaw's, and the same basic design on these 3 speeds all the way through from 55 to 65. Then we did T10s, and the T10s started in 57 and went through. Actually, they went up through 65s. They were in Corvettes up through 63, but there was other applications after 63, like Buick Specials and Oldsmobiles and Pontiacs. So in 63, GM decided to come out with their own Muncie, which was a in-house transmission. And I got to tell you a real quick story. So the early 63s had patent pending wrote on the side of the case. And the patent number didn't come out until, I think, 64. And when I actually looked at this patent just to see what it looked like. And the pictures in this patent were all T10 patents. And so I think what happened was GM had the patent on a 4-speed transmission in 1957, and Borg Warner was just making those transmissions based on that patent. But at any rate, the patent number finally started showing up in 64, 7 years later, for a transmission that looks just like a T10. At any rate, let's go to the next one. These I'm going to whip through pretty quick because these Muncies I've done before, I think. This is a very early Muncie output shaft. It's for 63s and 64s only. And the only thing that's unique about it is this little area right here. And it's a flat spot, and that is where the speedometer goes. And it's a very small area, and I'll show you on the next one, the area got larger, and I'll tell you why. But on this one, it's just, so when you press the speedometer gear on, you know exactly where it's going to go. It's got to go in this flat that's right here. The reason for this is where the plastic speedometer comes through the tail housing and rides on the driving speedometer gear. So this is a 1965 through 68, 65 through 68, and you can see that the area here is much larger, it's longer. And so the speedometer gear can go in 2 different places. And so for the cars that have speedometers that go where the speedometer cable comes in from the passenger side, it goes in one place, and if the speedometer gear comes in from the driver's side, it goes in the other place. So they had to make this little area larger so it would hold both speedometer cables. This will fit almost most of the Muncies, not the real new ones like the 70s, but most of the 60s. This will work.
Notice he said new, 1970.
And when you start doing it to some 14, this is a lot of these feel new to me still. This one will not work on anything other than a case that has a tail housing that exits on the driver's side. This is driver's side only, and from that point forward, they have a longer flat, and that could handle both. This one is almost the same. It's got one thing that's different. It's got a little hole there, and in the year 1969, GM decided to put plastic speedometer driving gears in, and there's a little clip that holds them in that hole. They only did it from 69, and some of the 70s have it. I'm not crazy about that gear. It does work, but there's things that can go wrong. I don't like plastic gears, and that little clip sometimes comes loose, so there's some issues with it. You can also, on this one, on this output shaft with the hole in it, you can also put, you can just press on a steel gear, and you don't have to worry about that little clip. So, in 1970 for some Chevelles, and in 1971 for all other GMs with Muncie 4-speeds, they went to this super big output shaft on their output shaft. This has a larger yoke on it. It's what I call the Turbo Hydro 400 yoke. And this is a really heavy-duty output shaft. I've never seen one of these ever bend. The thing that's unique, though, is that in the 1970s, the horsepower on the cars dropped because we lost the lead and the gas. And they did. I wish they would have done this about 4 years earlier, because this would have made a real nice dry shaft for those late 60s cars. Output shaft, rather. So, the last thing to talk about, and I hope this wasn't too boring.
No, this is great. People love this stuff.
So the last one is this shaft here. It's a Super T10 shaft. And it, like the 1970s Muncie shaft, it has a large output shaft. They used a plastic gear for it, but it is splined, so it does not come loose. It's on there. It's hooked on good, and it's got the Turbo Hydro splines for the output shaft. The other thing that they did in Super T10s versus the old T10s, there's a lot of similarities here, but the big change was this shoulder here. This shoulder right here keeps third gear and second gear separated. And that's really important, because the old T10s, the minute they got some wear on them, they had a tendency of popping out of gear. And that's because there's a rule with torque, and I don't know whether it's the right-hand rule or the left-hand rule, but when something is rotating, it has pressure going one way or the other, and it keeps that second and third gear in place. So that was a real big improvement for the Super T10s over the earlier T10s. And I think that about wraps it up. The only thing I didn't show here, there were some intermediary T10 output shafts that went between the early T10s and the Super T10s, and I just don't have one of those. They went on very few cars, and I just don't have one here to show you. They have the shoulder, though, the same way that the Super T10s do. So, I hope I didn't bore you too much.
I was awesome. I thought it was awesome. It was great to hear all this stuff.
Mark,
I appreciate it.
Mark came in today and he says, let's do another video. And I really wasn't even thinking about doing a video. And
we need stuff for the channel. And hey, I've got several videos with John explaining transmissions. We've been to his house in Ohio before, and we actually built transmissions. So go back into my old videos. I'll make sure I make a special playlist just for John, so you can see all the stuff that we've done together over it's at least 15 years now that we've been working together on this stuff.
That'd be great, Mark. I would appreciate it, and it would give people who call me, they want to see other videos we've done, and I just can't help them to find them. So that would be a big help.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, when Mark and I have more time, we're going to sit down and do maybe a two-part transmission assembly. And we're going to assemble a transmission, but it's going to be a little longer of a video. So we'll see. We'll see if we can make that happen. Maybe we'll do it. In 10 parts. I don't know, but we'll do it in segments and put a transmission together.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Hey, I'm retired. He's retired. This is our passion now. And he does transmissions. I put the whole car together. He does too. I mean, he's a Corvette guy, right?
Yep.
Through and through. So, I mean, I'm looking around his office here, and I'm seeing little notes on NCRS sales and rules. So he's got all the rules to follow for you guys to get your transmissions restored exactly right.
Yes.
So
yeah, there's a lot of small changes from year to year. It's amazing, and that's why I've still got about 125 transmissions here in Florida.
That's cool. All right. Mark Meldrum from Meldrum's Monster Garage here at John Perrette's workshop. So thank you again.
Take care.
See ya.
Mm-hmm.